Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about the shooting of a YouTube prankster that occurred at the Dulles Mall. I'm not going to name this prankster because a lot of his behavior is awful or criminal, and right now he's grifting off this, and I don't want to send him the money. However, he was shot, and the shooter on that was just acquitted on the basis of self-defense. There was no other argument there. Now, that means he was acquitted of the shooting, but he was still convicted with respect to a firearm charge for discharging a firearm in sort of an occupied space, and on that he faces 2 to 10 years. So he's still going to be looking at a lot of jail time, just not as much as he would have if he was convicted on the shooting. So this has a lot of people divided because there's video of this, and a lot of people have different opinions as to whether or not this was properly self-defense, whether the jury got it right. So I want to watch through this video with you guys. We're going to watch through it once just as it is. And that's partially so that you can see just how fast these things unfold and you can get a good sense of everything in context. Then we're going to review some of the law around the self-defense shooting in the area that we're looking at. And then I want to go back and go through this slowly, bit by bit, and sort of break down things that I observe as a criminal defense lawyer. Because doing criminal defense, you get to see a lot of, you get to learn a lot about what self-defense looks like. And what I mean by that is that I'm not the expert on self-defense in the terms of like how to fight someone off. I'm not an ex-Navy SEAL. I haven't, done martial arts for decades. I'm just some guy. However, I have seen a lot of what dangerous interactions look like and how they start and how they go. And so I've got a pretty good sense of what looks dangerous to me, what looks like it's about to turn into a serious assault, and I can talk about that as we go. And that's important to know for self-defense as well, because it tells you when you should be leaving a situation, when things are bad, and when maybe you want to try to get away before something turns awful. All right, let's have a look at this video. As I said, we're going to watch through it once just to see it as it is.
What?
Hey, quit thinking about my twinkle.
What's that mean?
Hey, quit thinking about my twinkle.
No.
Hey, quit thinking about my.
Get on my face and call cops on me. Stop.
Hey, quit thinking about my twinkle.
Stop.
All right, so got to cut out the actual moment of the shooting because it's YouTube. They don't want to see that. Also, because it's YouTube, we can't say the full thing that was being played on that. But it was, hey, dip, stop thinking about my twinkle, where the sort of word there is DIPSHIT. I got to spell it out like I'm talking around my dogs. But YouTube, it's worth noting that YouTube requires me to avoid swearing, and yet they allow this kind of prank content where somebody is actively going out and harassing members of the public. Just something to think about, YouTube, is that, is this really what we want to be encouraging in our society? Now, as I said, I want to go through and look at the jury instructions on self-defense because that is going to be very significant in this case, right? What are you actually allowed to do versus what are you not allowed to do? And I think this one is actually quite an interesting case for what we're looking at here. Okay, let's go through the jury instructions because this is what the jury would actually have been told about how they are to reason. And I'm just going to note, this is via lawofselfdefense.com, Andrew Branca's channel. Check him out for self-defense content and legal content around that because his work is excellent. All right, Virginia Model Jury Instructions for Defendant Without Fault. Now, I think we can all agree that this is the scenario that applies here. This guy's just a delivery driver, and he does nothing to bring this on himself. He doesn't pick a fight or anything like that. The only reason why they might have targeted him is maybe because he's a little smaller and because he's got stuff in his hands. He's maybe a little more vulnerable. I kind of think that they've probably been punched in the face before. When I looked over some of this guy's content, I noticed that he tends to approach a lot of older people, smaller people, women. He kind of chooses his targets for the vulnerable. That's what seems to be the case in his videos. All right, so if you believe that the defendant was without fault in provoking or bringing on the fight, and you further believe that, so this is, again, that's what the without fault here means. He reasonably feared under the circumstances as they appeared to him that he was in imminent danger of bodily harm, and he used no more force under the circumstances as they appeared to him than was reasonably necessary to protect himself from the perceived harm. Then he acted in self-defense, and you shall find the defendant not guilty. This is actually a fairly restrictive standard. It actually requires quite a bit in order to establish that in order for the self-defense criteria. By contrast, a lot of other places have less restrictive criteria, including, I'll note this because I've had some people challenging me on Twitter, Canada. So Canada's defense of persons says a person is not guilty of an offense if they believe on reasonable grounds that force is being used against them or another person, or that a threat of force is being made against them or another person, and the act that constitutes the offense is committed for the purpose of defending or protecting themselves or the other person from that use of force, and the act committed is reasonable in the circumstances. We don't have that necessary element in Canadian law anymore. It's just reasonable. So that's a less restrictive standard. That's our sort of criteria here, and we'll keep in mind that's what we're looking at as we go through and look at this. I'll also talk a little bit more about the sort of Canadian standards after we watch the video again, because I think that they can shed some light on this. They can possibly be helpful. Okay, let's go back and watch the video. As I said, I'm going to pause at various points to identify things that I notice that I think are relevant here. So the first thing I notice, even before we get started, is I don't see any sort of security presence here or anything like that. And that's really up to the pranksters. They get to choose where they do this. And so they're unlikely to pick a place where they're going to get interrupted by security or anybody like that. They're not going to pick a place where somebody can come in to help. So let's keep going.
What?
So you see immediately his motion is he's moving back. He's clearly feeling threatened. He's backing away from this person. His body language, he's leaning back, and he's ending up against this counter as this much larger person moves in clearly to confront him and is getting into his personal space very quickly. This is something that is often a harbinger that you're about to get attacked. People don't do this normally. People don't do this unless they have some sort of aggressive intention.
What's that in?
Now, you see the two of them move up very close, right up in his face, and the second guy points his finger at him, which is, again, when somebody's getting right in your personal space like that and starts pointing their finger at you, that's also an aggressive gesture. This is something that you use to communicate that you're willing to escalate to physical violence. These aren't just, sort of casual behaviors. What these guys are doing, what the joke is that they're specifically making people fear that they're about to be physically attacked. And that's also reinforced by the nature of the message here. Some people online have said, oh, this is just, it's just a weird sort of quirky message. It's not just a weird quirky message. They would have spent some time thinking about what message they wanted to include. And the message again is, hey, dip. So a swearing insult as the lead in. Quit thinking about my twinkle. Well, okay, what is that trying to imply? That sounds to me like a euphemism, and specifically a euphemism that is making an allegation about some sort of homosexual, thoughts or whatever. This is, the way I read this is that the intention was to suggest that this was some sort of homophobic confrontation. And the reason why I think that's relevant is because it goes to what the motivation is for somebody who's coming up in your face like this. There's all sorts of different motivations they might have. Like they might be saying, hey, you dropped your phone. Okay, this would be a very aggressive posture for you dropped your phone, but that's still, that would be one sort of communication. Whereas they might be saying, that's our food, in which case, you know what they want. They want the food. Or they might be saying, give me your wallet. Again, you know what they want. They want your wallet. But where somebody's coming after you and their confrontation, their reason for it appears to be personal, some sort of insult, and that they want to do you harm, that is a very different thing. Somebody who says, because of who you are, I want to do you harm, or because I feel that you have wronged me, I want to hurt you, which is what this message appears to be conveying in this context. That's a very different thing. It connotes a very different kind of confrontation, a different kind of altercation, and one where really there's no limits as to what they might do to you. This is something, I consider this to be a very high threat scenario. And again, this guy's outnumbered. He's trying to back up, but he's got two people. One of them is substantially larger than he is, confronting him. And this is out of the blue. He has very little time to react. This whole clip is 20 seconds.
About my twinkle.
No.
Hey, we're thinking about my
Get on my Facebook call Thompson. Stop.
So he's backing up. He clearly doesn't want any part of this confrontation. He tells them to stop. He's trying to leave. He paused at the phone. I don't think that's a great idea. If he knocked the phone out of their hands, there's one of two outcomes. One, they go for the phone, and that gives you a chance to make an escape. Or two, they start the violence, and that's not really the outcome you want here. So he's still very concerned here. He's trying to disengage. He's trying to leave, and he tells them outright that he'll call the cops. He's saying, but of course he can't call the cops right now because what is he going to do? Pull out the phone? Hello, 911, what's your emergency? Police, please hold. Yeah, police. Yeah, there's two guys here who are currently beating my face in. I mean, that's not going to work. Calling the police takes some time. Calling the police is something that usually you don't have the luxury of doing when you're in the middle of a confrontation. People are typically able to call the police after the confrontation. So,
we're thinking about my twinkle.
Stop.
so the guy keeps advancing, keeps coming after him, including continuing to play the threatening message. And he's not speaking directly. He's just continuing to play this, which again makes you wonder, like, what is this guy? Is he on drugs? Is there some mental illness? What is this guy doing? What is his purpose? He certainly isn't taking stop. He's not taking anything like that. And he's adopting a very aggressive stance, one that suggests that him and his buddy, I don't know if this guy's noticed the cameraman, but he is outnumbered 3-1. But he might only think that he's outnumbered 2-1. But I don't think it's unreasonable for him to think that he's about to take a serious beating here. This seems to me to be an entirely rational conclusion. We know after the fact that it's wrong. We know after the fact that that conclusion is erroneous. But the only way we know that is because we've got the benefit of hindsight. This analysis here, this discussion takes way longer than he had. Even if you just watch this video and think about it for a few seconds and then, post your thoughts online, you've had way more thinking time than this guy did, and under much better circumstances. This guy doesn't get to sit down in a comfortable chair, in a comfortable space, and hypothesize about it. He's in the moment. He's got to be worried about what's going on. This is why the Canadian principle is that we don't measure force to a nicety when you're in the face of an upraised knife. Now, people have said there's no knife here, there's no gun, there's no anything like that. But it doesn't take those things to cause serious injury to somebody. We can't imagine, we can't sort of hypothesize and say, well, what if he had a gun? Did you see a gun? We didn't see a gun. You can't hypothesize what if he has a knife because did we see a knife? Did we see anything that suggests a knife? I didn't see any of that. But we can certainly say this guy is a large person who appears to be coming at him with the intention to cause him physical harm. How much injury could this guy and his buddy do to you? And the answer is pretty horrific. I've seen a number of cases where unarmed people have caused, serious injuries, including death. So this guy is in a direct confrontation. Now, what other options does he have? I don't think he had pepper spray here. And quite frankly, this video is an excellent reason to, if you are allowed to in your jurisdiction, carry pepper spray. Because pepper spray would have been a better option here, and I suspect he would not have been charged at all if he had that and deployed it. I think that that would have been 100%, he'd be fine here. But if you don't have it, then you can't use it. This is an excellent reason to have a range of options. Of course, here in Canada, we have 0 options. The option is just hope that the people confronting you are pranksters who don't intend you harm, because if they do intend you harm, you're going to, as Binger put it, you're going to have to take a beating, which I don't think is really a reasonable way for a society to be. But we're sitting here and we're looking at, at a scenario where this guy is being confronted. Now, the Virginia standard is quite restrictive. It has to be necessary, which is difficult. So let's say what's the other option that he might have here? Well, he could yell for help. I don't think help's getting there in time. I don't see that as an option here. He could try to physically engage them. Of course, his hands are full, but, let's say he throws it over his shoulder and starts trying to throw hands. I don't think he's going to beat those 2 guys. I don't think he'd even beat the bigger guy, but he's certainly not beating 2 guys. Let's say he pulls the gun and just displays it. Like just, hey, I've got a gun. And that is an intermediate use of force. I don't know that it would have worked here, because this is something that ideally you want some distance for. You don't want to be within grabbing reach when somebody's doing that. Maybe you'd be able to get some distance once they see the gun and they're like, whoa, 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 it's a prank, bro. But he doesn't know that. As far as he knows, the next thing is they might be smacking him, and that might happen at any second. So I don't think the jury got it wrong here in this consideration. I think that he had a reasonable fear under the circumstances as they appear to him, that he was in imminent danger of bodily harm, and that he used no more force under the circumstances as they appeared to him than was reasonably necessary to protect himself from the perceived harm. Now, we know after the fact it's just a prank, bro, but he doesn't know that. And when your prank is to make somebody fear that they are in imminent danger, then they may react. They may believe you. Like, you lie to somebody to convince them that they're in danger, and they believe you. It's an entirely expected consequence of telling that particular lie. Now, somebody was confronting me about what about the Canadian standard, and I'm adding the whole Canada section just because of that person who, you're welcome. But let's look at the factors in Canadian law, because Canadian law actually breaks down a number of things that a jury must consider in making this determination. So let's have a look at that. All right, so in determining whether the act committed is reasonable under the circumstances, again, this is Canadian, not Virginia. The court shall consider the relevant circumstances of the person, the other parties in the act, including but not limited to the following factors. 1, the nature of the force or threat. Unarmed, but 2 people, including one who's much larger. So he's under some serious threat there. The extent to which the use of force was imminent, and whether there were other means available to respond to the potential use of force. Looked pretty imminent to me. They were right in his face. I didn't see anybody he could call for help. He was trying to get away. He tried other means. So, yeah. Person's role in the incident, i.e., did you start the fight or what was going on there? In this case, innocent delivery driver who just somebody who these violent criminals kind of thought it would be funny to target. Whether any party to the incident used or threatened to use a weapon. One party did. That was the person, the shooter here. So that one weighs against him. The size, age, gender, and physical capabilities of the parties to the incident. In terms of physical capabilities, that weighs heavily in favor of the shooter here because he's smaller, he's outnumbered. My light is doing a weird thing. I'm not going to fix it. We'll just have to live with it. I'll change it afterwards. The nature, duration, and history of any relationship between the parties to the incident, including any prior use or threat of force, and the nature of that force or threat. They have no prior involvement as far as I can tell. Any history of interaction or communication between the parties to the incident? None. They don't know each other. That this guy being a stranger attacking you is all the more concerning. Canadian case law finds it highly aggravating when you're attacked by somebody who's a stranger to you, who's attacking you for no reason. The nature and proportionality of the person's response to the use or threat of force. You might say that it was a little disproportionate in the sense of being shot is worse than getting beaten. Except maybe, I mean, you don't know, once somebody's got you on the ground beating you, you don't know where that stops. There's just no way to know where that stops. And I don't think it's reasonable for a person to have to be like, well, I hope that they stop at a point where I'm still able to live my life. You know, I hope they only send me to the hospital. So whether the act committed was in response to use or threat of force that the person knew was lawful, i.e., was somebody else defending their property? Was somebody else a police officer? Those kinds of things. That doesn't apply here. So, all right. So let's sort of, look at this one. I think that in a lot of ways, this shows a real problem with our society, because this is a situation where these three individuals, two guys and the cameraman, have formed an organized group for the purpose of making money by harassing the public, and including harassing the public in ways that may cause them to fear for their safety. And I think legitimately fear for their safety. There was an interview, and I'm not replicating this interview here, but I did see an interview where a woman indicated that this prank, or one of the pranks that they used targeting her, caused her to feel very afraid. These are people who are essentially bad actors. They know they're bad actors. They know that they are a burden to the public and a threat to the public. The average member of the public does not want to encounter these kinds of people, ever. And so we run into this problem. When you have these kinds of prank channels, they tend to escalate their behavior to a point where they engage in behavior like this that will make people feel a deep threat to their safety. And quite frankly, I think that this was a reasonable fear that this guy had, that he was about to be imminently attacked, and imminently attacked to a degree that may cause him serious bodily injury or death. Now, death might be less likely, but serious bodily injury happens all the time from people getting attacked by more than one person who outsize them, especially when those people are attacking them for no reason or for reasons of personal animosity. Somebody who really wants to lay a hurting on you can probably do it. So, I don't know. I don't think the jury got this one wrong. I think that based on the standards they were faced with, that they made the right call. What do I think a jury would do in Canada? I think that the juries in Canada tend to be a little more restrictive on self-defense and so forth. I think that they might be more inclined to think that this guy should have just gotten his face punched in. And keep in mind, that's almost certainly what he would have thought. I have seen a number of videos that look just like this one that weren't just a prank, bro, and that where somebody actually did sustain serious injuries. So you don't know it's just a prank, bro, and it's never safe to assume that these guys are pranksters and not violent psychos. So, yeah, I don't know. I suspect in Canada we'd probably see a conviction here, but I don't know if that's the just result. Anyway, I'm glad nobody's dead. It is unfortunate that these pranksters have indicated that they want to continue to make their videos, and also that law enforcement appears to be unable or unwilling to step in to stop them from posing this threat to the public. But they are willing to step in if you defend yourself. So, good for them, I guess. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this to be interesting or educational. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: Lembus for the Elf, CCFR, Canada's National Firearms Association, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. And at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Larry Kalniak, Here's a Coin, Legal Witcher, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, Vicky, and Dorky Dane. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. Hope this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.